Hello and thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. I have a half-page piece of dark blue foil, and I'm applying a base coat of Brilliance Moonlight White pigment ink onto the foil. And I'm using this type of ink because this type of ink will dry on non-porous surfaces such as the foil. Okay? And what I'm doing here is I'm providing a surface for my impressions to go on, okay? I can stamp dark impressions on this foil, but I won't be able to see them because there's not enough contrast, so this foundation of white applied in various thicknesses will provide that foundation in which we can see black stamped imagery, okay? All right, now going back to the Brilliance inks right here. The Brilliance inks, they are the types of inks that can not only stamp onto non-porous surfaces and dry, they can air dry or they can be heat set in a few seconds. But that's really important. They're different from other types of oil-based pigment inks. Okay, Brilliance is a water-based pigment ink, and it has some kind of fast-drying component in it. All right, so I just love how this looks because when you apply kind of a thick layer of that white, it looks more opaque and white. But you can see where I've just applied a little bit of it. It looks more like a glowing blue with that very reflective foil surface. You know, that foil's dark, but it reflects a lot of light. Okay, so I just have a general idea of where I'm going to stamp a couple of my first different components, okay? So I'm laying down some white that will represent clouds in the background, okay? And I'm just using a ripped paper towel. I think a ripped paper towel really gives you the, I don't know, maybe in terms of a stamping application, maybe the loosest type of oh, like a, I don't know, what do you call those? Templates. Okay, it's like a template, all right? And I don't know, for really realistic clouds. Okay, so I use that, but then you can see I'm just freehanding some ink over the top of those defined paper towel template applications. Okay, so you get the edge with the paper towel, but then you freehand after, and you go above and below that ink that you applied using your templates, and that gives you that real soft, billowy type of look. Okay? And you just kind of spread it around like that. And see that? Kind of that real hazy look on the top of those clouds. I feel that there's a nice movement to them like that. Okay? All right, so this ink is going to be really quite wet, and it's great because it allows you to move it around as need be. But now I'm going to heat set this, okay? And just keep your heat gun moving around. You might get a little bit of buckling with the foils, you know, that metallic surface. I try to heat set on both, you know, front and bottom of the card. But don't keep your heat gun in any one area for too long. Don't try to heat set and dry like a thick application like instantly. Okay, so here's my first impression, the Snowy Creek, okay? And you can, you know, it shows up fairly well, but it didn't show up enough for me, so you'll see what I do later on. Okay, so I'm creating a slope right there for one side of my bridge, okay? And I'm using the grassy bluffs here, and I used only a small portion of it, and see, that'll provide the other bank for my bridge to rest in. And there goes the other impression, the full impression of the grassy bluffs. So I have two kind of little hills in the back, or slopes at least, okay? We're going to mask them off, and I'm going to stamp the bridge right in there using black ink, okay? All right, and then we have our bridge there. Now that bridge doesn't stand out enough for me, so I'll show you what we're going to do with that later on. Okay, I do see that cloud, you know, in the back of it, but there really needs to be a lot more white underneath that bridge, so we'll mask that off and fill that in later. Okay, so here, I'm looking at this scene now, and now that the imagery has been placed, I'm going in and defining the snowy slopes more now that I know where everything is going to be positioned, okay? Now I'm just using a cotton ball here, and it doesn't give me a real crisp definition. I could use some masks or something like that, just some loose masks, but I didn't do that here. I'm just freehanding it in. So I'm just trying to define ever so loosely these snowy banks to that creek, okay? And you can see when you start applying more and start building up your white inks, it becomes more opaque and more kind of reminiscent of, I don't know, maybe some lighting, maybe moonlight or something like that on those banks, okay? All right, so we'll follow suit with this other side. Now that, you know, I've established how light the scene is going to be, you'll want to follow suit with the rest of the scene as well, just to kind of match that brightest area, such as the right side of the creek. Okay, now right here, I'm trying to apply it unevenly. You can see on that, I have this upside down right now, but you can see on the right side, it's left right now, you know, there's variation on those banks, okay? And that's what you want here too. You don't want things completely evenly applied, okay? Because that would flatten out that landscape. When you have variation in terms of the amount of ink you use in certain areas, it looks more reminiscent of changing slopes and volumes, okay? So that, I don't know, that gets us off the hook of having to be really precise and machine-like, you know, with machine-like precision when it comes to our application of media, okay? All right, now we're going in with this 3mm white paint pen, and this really was a very bold application of white right here. I wasn't really aware of just how white that pen is going to look on here. This is an acrylic paint pen, okay? And it's a pretty broad-tipped one, but that is really standing out on this piece, okay? And I'm just following the contours of that creek, the creek stamp. All right, so I have that, and that was almost, it was visually shocking to me almost. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to blend that in. And that's what this kind of technique on this one, in this scene, is about here. It's not always so extreme like this, but see how I'm kind of blending out that paint pen application, going with even lighter banks, okay? Now I'm doing a little masking here, just with a paper towel edge, okay? Sorry, I'm working off screen right here, but I'll try to get back on screen soon here. But just really kind of building this up right here. Okay, can you see that where it's kind of blending in with that edge a little bit better now, okay? And a cotton ball isn't, you know, the perfect tool for, you know, a precision type of application of media, but I'm just doing a general type of application right now, okay? Now you can still see that white pen up there, but what I'm doing is I'm bringing the rest of the scene a little bit closer to that value of white, okay? So we're just trying to kind of, you don't have to match it, but we're just trying to decrease the contrast because it stood out so much, okay? So I'm just following suit, bringing everything up slightly lighter in value now, okay? All right. Filling in, you have to kind of hold it out at arm's distance periodically, or a lot, you know, to get the feel for your overall scene, and in this case, lighting scheme. When we're working with lighting schemes, I'm usually working on, you know, kind of white pieces of paper or something like that, very light surfaces, so we're usually defining lighting through shading. So this is kind of a different, it's a different mindset because we're creating light with a light medium in terms of the white pigment ink here. It's really fun though. It's almost like you're, I don't know, it's like you're sculpting a surface or something like that when you're working with like a reverse, like a white on dark. It's almost like a different part of the brain, I think. That's what I speculate. I don't know. But after kind of observing my classes that I used to teach. Okay, so white trees, kind of, you know, your, I don't know, ice-covered trees, snow-covered trees. Going for the second impression right there. And I'll go for a third impression, but just using a small portion just on the other side to kind of balance things off. It's just a little touch, and here I'm trying to decide if I want any more throughout there, but I think any more of those the pine row in the foreground would have been overkill. Okay, so you got to heat set these as you go. The reason being is that, you know, when you're working on a size like this, you don't want to, you know, inevitably you're going to have to lay your hand down on it, so it's just better if it's dry. Okay, so I felt the larger pine trees in the foreground look good. And see how I'm using just the tip of it to create those smaller pines in the background, and I'm putting them right on that slope. Okay, and just a wet paper towel. Okay. So you can really create a whole forest with one tree, in theory. I mean, I used the pine row in the background, but if I didn't have it, I could have used just that one pine tree throughout this entire piece. Okay, so we're going for a little bit of an impressionistic look in this pointillism type of application of white here. I didn't blend in that bank really well with just the white pigment ink. So here we're going in with this additional white pen to just kind of blend it in a little bit. It does change the spirit of the piece a little bit in terms of these white dots, but we'll try to blend those dots in with a finer tipped white pen later. Okay. Now these look strange, I know, and it's because it's a completely different texture than what we have in the rest of the piece right now. Okay. And when people start doing these types of things, they say, oh my God, it looks terrible. Okay. A lot of times when they do certain techniques, but you have to kind of develop certain types of techniques to kind of a fuller, more complete resolution for things to start coming together. Like this piece right now, it's starting to come together a little bit more. Now I'm using a extra fine paint pen just to fill in and to model the edges of this bank a little bit more. Okay, so I can see it starting to come together, but it's still not together at this point in time. Everything's kind of muddled. That bridge in the background doesn't really stand out at all. So I'm still looking for solutions, but I'm just developing things. I'm not really, worried about the end result at this point in time. I'm just trying to solve certain types of visual issues that, where we're at right now in the process. Now, see, that right bank looks pretty good, I think, with this white pen. So it's like, okay, that solved that issue, okay? But now I'm laying down all these dots, and these dots do stand out because they're a different textural type of quality than the rest of the scene. The rest of the scene has that real kind of billowy, soft application of white pigment ink. And here we have these crisp little dots, okay? They don't stand out too much because, they're white on white, okay? But they do stand out enough. But what you do is you keep working with that same type of texture, and we'll carry that out into the rest of the scene, bringing continuity to the piece, specifically textural and lighting continuity. The lighting portion is, part of it is because it is white, and we'll be applying it on darker areas, okay? Not necessarily in real dark areas, but just darker than white. All right, so you can see those banks of that creek, I think, have largely been incorporated, the white paint pen banks, okay? They just blend right in now, okay? Okay, now I'm working with an acrylic paint pen, and I am working over that dried white pigment ink. Inevitably, what happens is you start getting some of that white pigment ink that's already laid down going up into the white paint pen tip. So periodically you have to just do a little scribble on some, scratch paper and just kind of, get it flowing again. It doesn't take too much though. Okay, now here's where I start bringing continuity into the rest of the piece. You can see me using these little dots on some of those other elements and forms in the background, like that background grassy hill. Sorry I'm working off screen right here, but I'm putting some on that bridge too, that stone bridge. I don't want to put too much, okay, because it is in the background and it's not in as illuminated an area as snow, okay? It's not going to be reflecting a ton of light. Okay, so here we go with the trees. I just start putting some of this, these little dots on the tree, on the limbs, the trunk portion. And I put a little bit more on the foreground ones, okay? You won't see so many like highlights on distant trees, but I still apply it down there on them. And see that right there? Doesn't it make those trees look a little bit more three-dimensional, having variation in white on those trees? Okay, and it makes them look more three-dimensional, but it also brings that textural continuity into the piece. Okay. And don't they look kind of shimmery too, like that now? And icy? It's I don't know, it's a little bit more festive. It's not Christmas lights, but, you know, it's this little white, twinkly, little reflective, I don't know, it represents reflected light. Okay, now everything was starting to look a little bit too soft and, you know, white, so I'm adding this little rock structure into it. And here comes the dough. It didn't stamp out as dark as I wanted it to, but I don't know. So be it. Okay, that happens sometimes. It looks like lighting is hitting it or something like that. It gives it a little bit of texture. Okay, now underneath those pine rows up there, we need to blend those in. Okay, so I just cut a piece of paper towel, you know, in a little bit of an arc, and I'm adding this white at the base of those white pine trees in the background so that they kind of flow into the landscape a little bit more, okay? So we'll apply this in like that, and then what you do is you blend it in with a little bit of fog, a little bit of freehand kind of fog blending, just like I did up in those clouds in the background. I'm doing that right over those trees. Okay, and you can add some back there, you know, in the background as well. It just kind of softens everything up. Okay, now see that bridge. You still can't see that bridge in the background, so I'll be getting to that. That's another one of those areas that I need to solve. All right, heat setting again. Every time you kind of apply, you know, another layer of imagery or pigment ink or something like that, heat set. Okay, now see, I'm putting some fog at the base of that dough right there, okay? Now I couldn't do that if that dough was still wet. That's why you have to heat set it, okay? All right, now applying more contrast, going with some of these pine trees in black, okay? So we used them in white and black. It's kind of that yin-yang type of thing. I think the scene looked fine with just the white, but I think with this black, it just provides more framing and I don't know, maybe like a depth of field or depth of imagery for sure. Okay, I hardly ever use masks in my pieces, you know, unless it's like a torn paper towel or something like that. But that bridge is an isolated type of image, so with hard edges, so I need to mask it off to get that area underneath the bridge very cleanly, okay? So see, when I do that, now that bridge really stands out, okay? And it stands out, but now I have to blend it in, so you just freehand some of that white back into it, like that, and it just kind of mellows out some of the hard edges of that bridge, and putting a little bit more right at the edge of that bridge just to get the very corner of that bridge. And it also kind of blends in with the trees a little bit more. So we get that hard edge, and then we blend in like that. Okay? All right. That area up there was perfect for a little quote stamp, I thought, and to go within the theme of the piece. P-I-E-C-E. Okay, and we're going for some splatter painting. I don't want splatter painting over my words. You usually don't want to splatter paint over that. I mean, it's all uppercase, but especially if there was lowercase types of lettering, don't splatter paint it because it looks like, you know, you're dotting something, you know, too many letter forms, okay? All right, now we're going with a North Star type of thing. As I wrote in my Facebook post, I really put through the kitchen sink at this piece. Okay, now practice this type of 8-point North Star on scratch paper a couple times before it. I'm always using a downstroke, okay? So here comes the cross section. These ones are smaller little strokes, but when you have a horizontal piece too, make the horizontal arms of your star longer, okay? So you see how it's longer to mimic the elongated landscape nature of this piece. If you're doing something in portrait, then do the vertical points of your star longer, and that keeps everything within theme. Okay, now that splatter painting looks good, but what I'm doing is I'm doing larger snowballs or whatever. If it's in the sky, it could be a star or something like that. But these larger dots like this, it gives scale to that random splatter painting look, but it also kind of provides a textural stability to the piece by having those larger pieces in there. Okay, now the star really, it was kind of sharp, so I'm just kind of making it glow here with just a light application of pigment ink. Don't put a real thick application on there. You want to just do it very slowly. All right, little tape runner here. For my piece, these foils tend to start curling a lot, you know, when you heat set it several times. All right, so this is just a piece of white cardstock here, kind of flattening it out. I'm just lightly brayering too. I'm not brayering hard on there, okay? All right, then we have that, and I'll trim that down. So I have trimmed that piece like that, and now I'm applying it. You know, I did some more tape on this, and I'm applying it onto a piece of silver star dream, which I think complemented the piece nicely. It didn't provide very much contrast against that first white matting, but or mounting, but I think it did it enough. All right, so I'm just eyeballing here. I never measure out. I don't know, maybe I should sometime, because it comes out a little bit crooked sometimes, but I don't know. I just don't feel like taking the time to measure everything. The base of it, I tend to give that framing a little bit of a, you know, slightly larger base. Okay, so we have that, and at this point in time I thought, all right, we've thrown the kitchen sink at this in terms of technique. Why not add in some crystals? Okay, so here I'm applying some little drops of glue. I put a little bit of glue on that piece of paper, and I'm using this little thumbtack to, I don't know, kind of precisely position my little bits of glue. And the glue stays, you know, it's one of those thick types of glues, so it stays wet for a good amount of time. And these are some nice crystal rhinestones. Really fun elements in this type of piece. You know, we already have the reflective quality of the foil. Why not have some, you know, reflective kind of little sparkly little bits with these rhinestones? They really reflect a lot of light. And there's some very small ones too, you know, which are very subtle. I'm using kind of, I don't know, the first and second sizes. I'm dipping into right now a very small one, because I like to have variation in sizes too. Okay, so I have that up there in the sky. And I thought these really finished the piece off nicely. Again, I think it looked fine without it, but, you know, these types of little rhinestones are so inexpensive. Everyone has glue, you know. Why not? Okay, now I liked that up in the sky so much, I decided, why not put some down in the water as well? Or down that little creek, you know, as a little specular light, you know, really reflective, little shiny, little shimmering light reflections in the water too. And I keep my little thumbtack stuck in my glue thing, so it's just there ready when I need it. One of the hardest things is just getting those little rhinestones right side up. And I'm using a Marvy gem picker, I think it's called. I always forget the name of that tool. But it has this little rubber tip that just really gets the rhinestones or little gems to stick to it. Alright, so I'm applying these down. I'm using the smallest ones. I didn't want a big, you know, gem in my water. I just want these little sparkly bits. It's something that someone wouldn't even notice unless they held it up. See, and there's four little sparkles like that. Okay, thanks so much for watching.